Ahora, vale.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here with us. It's a pleasure having Josep Ricart from Harquitectes here with us. But before he starts with his lecture, I will try to explain why we have it here today with us. And I think most of you already know that from this course, we have settled our Asset Design Challenge office that is run by Manolo Bayo and me. He is taking the part of design and me the architecture one. And the idea from this office is trying to offer you the design competitions that they are abroad for students. So our idea is to show them, try to help you in whatever you need. And I think it's interesting because it's like a kind of activity, complement activity in your learning and teaching manners here in school. So doing competition is something that you will probably do. And I'm sure Josep has a lot of experience in that. And we think it's really important. So from that office, we arrived to an agreement with Foro Cerámico Hispalyt, who are a group of companies dedicated to the manufacturing and processing of ceramic materials. So they do a serial of activities focused for you students of architecture. And you can see here like the main ones. I think that's rolling by its own. So. And I will talk quickly about all of them because I think they're interesting for you. First one, and the main one, is the project contest. That's why it's linked to our Office of Competition. And as that agreement with Foro, we have two different modes, and I think it's running again. So our first one, and I don't know if that can go backward again. So anyway, one, it's about Architectural Project 6 with teacher Alfonso Diez, and it's our own competition. So they are competing between themselves, and they have interest price 200 euros and some mentions. So something that we will try to repeat next year because we think it's a good activity. But there is also another open call competition for all students in architecture in Spain. It's aimed to students from third year or higher, and even qualified architects from the last 2 years. And the topic is this chapel in the route of Santiago that you can see here. And here we can see if this changes some duties about the description. So it's free. You can search about the, that is running by its own again. So you can check about the basis in the website of the Foro Cerámico, and you can compete locally. So from your community here in Valencia, firstly, with a prize and mentions. And if you are winning an award, you can compete for the national one that is much more interesting, the prize, okay? There is so the basis you can control the debit. There is stop that. There's a jury with teachers and professionals, really important that they will deliver and decide which is the prize from Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, Sevilla, and from the same foro. And also they are offering another type of activity that I think is interesting, even though we can compete only with some categories because we are still not developing all of the grades. And that's an award for your own work that you've already developed. So it's not something that you have to do, it's something that you have already done for master final degrees and in the assignment of the final degree. All of them have to be based in fabric and face brick solutions because they are all working in those materials. So if you've got a work that you think that can fit in those categories, you can go away for the inscription. Again, here it's free. Again, the website, you can check the basis, and then the deadline will be in July. With interesting prices, and I think there is something really interesting too, that with the final degree award, there is also open for text for teachers. So teachers, you have some investigation, some research about face brick, you can compete for that award. With deliver, jury decision will take place on September, with an also professional jury from schools of all for all the country. And the third activity that the Foro Cerámico promotes is these learned lessons. That's why we've got here today Josep with us. And they are all lectures from different studios, professional studios, that they work in a really interesting way with these materials, and all over the country, even in Portugal. And some of them are already recorded, so you can check them and see them in the website of the Foro. And different typologies, different scale, different types of how they work with those ceramic materials. So really interesting, all of them. And finally, we've got here Harquitectes, that is the one that they are going to talk today with us. Other activities, the conference that they talk about much more about technical matters. So you can find here some material, building materials, how they work. So structure, thermal clay block, ventilated roofs, all searching for the passive house goal. Roofs made by ceramic roofs, different type of partitions, all made by ceramic. And as this activity, we're trying to search as well with the Foro, so we can be able to offer them to you, especially the ones that are working with these ceramic materials in your own project in the competition. And finally, we've got these factory visits that the main objective is you to see how these materials are being built, so you can physically touch them and have them seen in real life. So that's another interesting activity for you. And all of that finally is disseminated in different ways. So like the ceremony of awards for the prizes of the competitions, different levels, and the awards for the final project degrees. Also, they are going to publish a book where all that is going to be collected, and they can offer you that book as participants. And through the website of the Foro Cerámico, you can check all these activities. Even they are saying here that they will publish the final degree work in the magazine Con Arquitectura. So I think there are different activities promoted by the Foro that I think they're really interesting for you students. So you can check all of that in the website, or even email me if you need any further information. And I think that there are activities that we are trying to offer you as a complement, okay? So finally, and going back to our third point of the activities, learn lessons. Today we've got here, as I said, Josep Ricart from Harquitectes, and for me it's really honor to introduce him. And to introduce his work, I would like to go back a little bit, back to 1955, because I think in that year, 1955, there was an interesting article written by the architectonical critic Rainer Banham, that it was titled "The New Brutalism," a concept that later on has been really misunderstood. But in that article, Banham, speaking about the work of then young architects Allison and Peter Smithson, he wrote that brutalism was that architecture that was clearly readable in plan, that has this exposure of structure, and at the same time use these raw materials as found. So they were like really exposed, the materials they used. And in describing at that moment the work of Allison and Peter Smithson, most representative one, which was Hustanton School, he wrote, and I quote literally, "Hustanton appears to be made of glass, brick, steel, and concrete, and in fact is made of glass, steel, and concrete. Water and electricity do not come of unexplained holes in the wall, as much building does, but is delivered to the point of use by visible pipes and manifest conducts. one can see what Hustanton is made of and how it works. And there is no other thing to see except the play of spaces. And I would say that that's how each architects build their own architecture. It's brutal as Hustanton, sincere, honest. And if we add to that the way that they are constantly searching about sustainability and comfort for the users of them, I can say that they brilliantly built an architecture that probably clearly describes our today's society. So I will finally say that, as Rainer Bachmann wants to say about brutalisms, they work like this ethic architecture that finally becomes an aesthetic architecture. So I leave you with Josep, and thank you very much.
Thank you for your words, and thank you for the invitation that has been done by Hispalyt. That you agree to accept me as to be here giving you this kind of lecture about the stuff that we do. I've just decided this title yesterday, so I assume that the title is not very important. But it's supposed that I'm here to talk about brick architecture or brick construction or brick process and so on. I rather prefer not to talk about brick, but to talk about walls. And at least I think that I will try to define, to show you some projects talking more about the behavior of the architectural elements than the behavior of the product that are part of these elements. In fact, I'm always talking about the same with my students, about that we're not here to define new material, but to reorganize the material which is already there. So in general, I have the feeling that the students used to be, usually are really afraid about the white paper that has to be filled with drawings. This is just an abstract perception of architecture. The real approach to architecture is the material is already there, everything is already done, and our aim as designers and as architects is to reorganize the material. And to reorganize that, to define and to design how the material in this new organization will perform. The new behavior of this organization to give conditions to the space. Okay, so, but coming back to the idea of walls. Today, well, not today, but on last February, was the 20th anniversary of the office. So 8 architects began in 2000. So it's 20 years of process as an office. So I think that we are in the moment to have certain perspective about what we have done during these 20 years and talking about walls. At the very beginning of the office, as we are 4 partners working together, I assume that you know how difficult it is to design as a team and try to imagine to be a team of 4 is really difficult. And we have succeeded on that process because from the very beginning, we had what we call common places that we share in terms of idea, in terms of aims. And one of these common places was our interest for the vernacular construction, okay, for that kind of popular architecture without architects, that said Rudowski, that surround our common places. And I mean, the street where we live, the house of my grandparents, and so on. So we were interested on that architecture for a very logical approach, because it's that kind of construction that has not representative language. There's no language in that kind of constructions. And this is something very easy to be shared between 4 different peoples with different aims and with different desires. The only way to success being 4 people is to put away off the table any kind of personal desire. If not, it's impossible to agree. So an easy way to put this away is to put in the center of the discussion something without representative language, like is the vernacular construction. But at the very beginning of the office, our approach was just a formal approach. We tried to design facades that look like our neighbors, that kind of construction, vernacular construction. With the years, or with the months, let's say years, we discovered that the reason for that shape was the idea that a structural perform. That typical facades of our villages was like that because it was a structural wall working just as compression. So the halls has to be very vertical, narrow, and so on. So we began to do some new stuff with that kind of facades that works as a wall, not only in terms of shape, in terms of aspect, but also in terms of structural behavior. After that, we discovered that it's not a structural wall, it's a system. So when we talk about structural walls, we're talking about a structural system. That means, and then we discovered that through that system, it was possible to understand that there's a certain typology of buildings that are based, so not only the facade was based on a structural behavior, it was also the typology of the houses that we were doing, that suddenly we discovered that through the better understanding of the structural system, the typology of the house was also very close to the solution. Not only the typology, the next step was to discover that after this understanding of the structural relation with the typology was also there's also a relation between a structure and comfort. So the behavior of the structure could help, and we discovered that researching on that vernacular constructions at the very beginning. So it's been a large process, large research process, trying to understand better and better how that vernacular constructions works. So it's not only an image, at the end is also an idea of comfort. So for us, and I think that we are at that moment by now. So that is not only the last step, maybe it's to understand the one that I've been talking at the very beginning, that idea that the material is already there and we are just here to reorganize, to replace, to put in a new shape, something that is already there, which is very close also to the idea of vernacular, because vernacular is also about availability. What is available in terms of geography, or maybe nowadays, what is available in terms of economy. But the idea of availability is also deep concerned with the idea of vernacular. So I was trying only to give a short chronology of the office in terms of our relation with walls. But it's been 20 years of an approach which is step by step getting us closer to a deeper idea of the vernacular. Another strong concept on the office, it's deep concerned about what I've been explaining before, is that idea, this relation between space and structure. So as you will see, maybe I'm not talking about bricks, but you will see that the easiest way for us to get that close relation between structure and space is through structural systems that in general are very easy to develop by bricks. But the relation between space and structure was at the very beginning of the office for what I've been talking about, but it was during a journey to a very famous architectural example like is the Schinkel Pavilion at Charlottenburg, when we discovered that what used to be a blur idea about what kind of architecture we like, that common places, we suddenly began to discover that that blur commonplace was something very specific, that was that kind of architecture that the geometry of the space is defined by the geometry of the structure. This sounds, for me, it sounds like obvious, like naive, but if you see what is happening outside, what is happening in the contemporary architecture, it's hard to find out examples that are still working in that idea. That the structure through its geometry gives geometrical conditions to the space. The space is high or wide or narrow because of the structure. It's not like this in general. In general, what gives geometrical conditions to the space is the coatings, the refurbishments, the furnitures, I don't know. But we're not giving conditions to the space through the structure. And this is a lack for the architecture, because it's, of course, that what we do is not the only way to do architecture. And I don't want to look like a dogmatic one, talking about just one way to develop architecture. But it's the way that we feel really comfortable, because for us, from a previous personal experience, this is about experience. This is something that we experienced like 17 years ago, going to Germany and visiting this very famous architectural example, where we suddenly discovered that that blur commonplace feeling could be defined as this kind of architectures where geometry, space, and structure are the same. This is another journey that we did, a completely different place, but the same feeling. So that helped us to get closer to that strong idea for the office. This is a quarry in Mallorca, a real quarry, a quarry that was on production when we visited. And it looks like, I don't know if you know the Tindaya project from Chillida. You know Chillida, the sculpture? It was one of his famous non-realized projects, was an artistic space in Canary Islands. But this is a real place, an amazing place where the mountain, where the stone was it's a clear example of about what I'm talking about, how the structure is giving conditions, is defining the conditions of the space. For us, it's so pure, so powerful that, at least as a group, we haven't found a different way to develop our ideas. This example is amazing. This is something that it's very easy to visit. It's just in Barcelona, just 2.5 hours from here. This is the library of the UPF University. This is a fantastic joint venture, 100 years history, from Josep Ricart, a famous architect and engineer that developed a lot of markets in Barcelona at the end of the 19th century. And 100 years after, Clotet Paricio developed a library inside this building, which used to be just an infrastructure to stand up 3 meters of water, 17 meters high, to give water to the big park of La Ciutadella in Barcelona. That pure structure made by bricks is now one of the best buildings in Barcelona for me, and is again the same. So a very strong structure. In fact, the one who defined it far better than me was Paricio, teacher at Barcelona School of Construction, who defined that there's two big families of construction. The construction based on very specialized layers, okay? Let's try to imagine the facade of a skyscraper or the facade of a big facility, where every layer of the facade is placed there to roll in one use, and to be very specific, very specialized, and to be excellent. Okay, so that's let's say that there's a family of construction process based on that idea that a lot of products, but for very one specific purpose. In front of that, Aparicio defined what he called that construction that identifies structure and space. So it's the same thing. On one side, he said that the first one of the families has to be always new. You cannot imagine a vintage skyscraper, I suppose. It's impossible to imagine that. And a skyscraper has to be always new, because if one of the parts of the facade doesn't roll all right, the whole construction doesn't work. In front of that, this other kind of construction where structure and space are the same thing. Maybe it's not as perfect as the previous one, but in words of Aparicio, can elderly organically, can become old. This is a beautiful idea also to me. The idea that something made by people can become old in a natural way without big crises. So both are options, but for us, the process, the construction process that gives us a real experience is that kind of spaces defined by that kind of structures. Well, now I will show you some brick projects, but let's say that it's more about wall projects. That the general approach of the projects are what I've been talking about, which is the general approach of the office, but every one of the projects have specific reasons for the final result. Okay? This is one of this project is, it was a house, a very simple and basic house for a family, a young couple without child. This was, let's say, it's like 12 years ago or 13 years ago. So it was it was before the economic crisis that crossed the whole Occidental world. Okay, and it was especially traumatic in Catalonia in general, because we have a certain rules in terms of construction economics that was deeply affected because of the economic crisis. But let's put ourselves just before of that crisis, a young couple with both with jobs, asking us for a house, the house of their dreams, for the rest of their lives, with an expectation, high level of expects about program and luxury, let's say. That suddenly, in a very strange plot, triangular shaped plot. But what happened about this house, and give reason of the final aspect, the final look of the house, was that during the process, the economic crisis shows up in Europe and especially in Spain. Okay, so in fact, a lot of people here, we call that crisis the brick crisis. It was the crisis of the bricks, we used to call that, because the part of the economic in Spain that was deeply affected was the construction economics. Well, at the very beginning, our first proposal on the left side of the slide was based on their dreams, their expectations, their idea that what family they want to become, with a couple of childs, with the mother-in-law living at home, something bizarre to imagine, but they were like that. Car into a garage, and so on. During the process, we discovered that that was not the family that they already was. They were just a couple with good jobs, and it was totally unnecessary to propose them a two-story house and so on. So we tried to make the house as simple as possible. But even that, when they went to the bank asking for the mortgage, you say, the bank answered that it was impossible. It was, we have to imagine that it happens from 2007 to 2006 to 2009. So suddenly the crisis, they discovered the crisis on a meeting with a bank officer, answering them that the mortgage was not possible, that the only money that they can get was the half of what is supposed. So from 320,000, the intermediate step was like 240,000, but the bank was also, the only money that they can get from the bank was 120,000. Okay, so it was that process that from that idea, the house suddenly get totally naked. What was the economic strategy here? It's not only as simple as say, okay, we get the house naked. No, it was try to understand in the complex construction process that it means a house, who can do all the steps of the house. It could be the plumber, it could be the carpenter, or in our case, in our tradition, in our vernacular tradition, the easiest guy who could assume all the roles of the construction process was the masonry. So we decided, we redefined the whole house to be built, also the plumbery, to be built by the masonry. So, and it was like one weekend work. So because after 2 years of working, after the answer of the bank, they called us, they asked us for a meeting. They said us that the house was not possible, that the only way it was to build a mobile home for a certain number of years, waiting for better years and to develop the house. We answered them that if they were able to give us a couple of days to redefine the project, they did agree. And our process was to find out how to make the process as simple as possible. The result, of course, is that as only the masonry, who is not the specialist on plasters, was able to do the house, there's no plasters, there's no coatings, there's nothing, okay? And we tried to find out in such a conventional element as a brick, as a commercial structural brick, can roll as a facade, to roll as a structural wall, to roll as a texture, and to give. So by economic reasons, we discovered that a wall made by bricks, if it's not coated, is able to give much more conditions to the inside space than if it's coated. Okay, so it was not only an economic process, it was not only a strategic process about construction, it was also a personal research process where we discovered a lot of things. Well, this is an example that also to hold up the soil, we developed a system that could be done by one guy. So it's not necessary even to produce big foundations to fix the soil in the garden. This is a hard work for the architect because this house, very small house, 120 square meters, is drawn brick by brick to reduce as maximum as possible the amount of waste materials. Okay, so as this corner is like this, not for a formal desire, but for an efficiency desire, an efficient desire to reduce the amount of waste material. Well, after that step, we became a little bit more comfortable with that idea of naked bricks and with the idea of uncoated architecture, and we discovered that there's a large number of options in terms of expression, in terms of architectural quality. So after the previous house, which was a survival exercise, we did a house where it was not about survival, but it was about luxury, but working again with bricks. So we did the same kind of process, but talking with a customer, with a family, with a large budget, able to do a luxury house. But where was the meeting point? The meeting point was that people, you look, that is a very humble house, but this is for I won't say a rich guy, but a family with budget enough in a very rich area close to Barcelona. The common point here, it's a little bit funny, that family has not a large, but a very interesting collection of art based on paints. Okay, so they were looking for an architect who was able to develop a house based on walls, because they want to hold up their paints. So searching on the young offices in Barcelona, the only one that they found out that were or felt comfortable designing with walls, not with diaphragm, big halls, huge windows, case study, watching to the horizons. The only one that they found out was Harquitectes. So they gave us the project based on that idea. So we developed a house that is based on walls, but is also based on a crossing space that put in relation both sides of the garden. They were also very interested on that idea of garden surrounding the house. As you see, they have a Jaguar car. But we asked them to put the car out of the house. We don't like to spend that idea of architecture, that idea to give conditions to the space and waste that to give conditions to the space for the car. So at least that family understood that was better for them as family to give the good space to the people and not to the car. So they accepted that, place the car outside the house. So there's no garage in this house. It's three very clear volumes, one for the sons, one for the fathers, one for the parents, and in the middle, this is the perfect client, because they have budget, and what they ask for, they cumplieron. They were they keep their word. So they swore that, and they swore that the heart of the house has to be the kitchen, and really is the kitchen. I mean, there's lots of people that come to the office asking for a house where the kitchen has to be the heart of the house, but at the end they want a sitting, they want a garage, and so on and so on. In this case, they want us because of the walls, and they were able to develop a house where the real heart is the kitchen. In fact, this house has no sitting. There's no sitting. It's just kitchen, bedrooms, and this porch that cross from one side of the other of the garden, that in winter time works as a gallery, and in summertime works as a porch. But again, with a very humble element like the bricks, but trying to develop a very specific, very professional, very serious process of research in construction. It's like 12 years ago. So, I mean, for us was a learning process to understand what it means to work with structural walls, what it means to avoid thermal breaches between outside and inside. So it was a pretty interesting process. For us, it was a big learning process. The porch works as a real porch in summer and as a gallery in winter, as I said, producing that double kind of, both kind of spaces are clearly defined by a structure, but absolutely opposite. So this is something that we also like to produce, is that idea of contrast, that when you're crossing the thresholds of the houses, you're coming from one atmosphere to the opposite. This is something that for us gives an idea of narrative, an idea of process. I deeply believe that what we do as architects is what we have to project. I think that the hardest work when you are at the school is to understand what it means to project architecture. And my own definition is that to project architecture is to project the perform of people and the perform of spaces. I mean, the idea of performing is what we have to project. Then what we design is the conditions to make possible that kind of performance. And at the end, the only decision that we really do through our drawings is to reorganize material. But the idea of projection is not about objects. It's about living. The idea of projection, what we have to preview in the future is what people gonna do, is what gonna happen with the air, is what will the performing. Performing is not only about people, it's also about the performing of materia, because that wall has inertia and is performing. That wall is not coated, so has a lot of porous, so it's performing also in terms of humidity. So what we have to project is a performing. And here the performing of the two kind of spaces are based on how the structure give conditions. Conditions in terms of geometry, but conditions also in terms of proportions, in terms of inertia, in terms of humidity control. So those are the porch that cross the house. One is more like an entry, the other one is more like a seating or a gallery seating. And then the inside spaces, as you see, is as humble in terms of aspect growth as the picture show. But this completely is a luxury experience to be here in that relation with the garden, crossing to that kind of spaces, big, really comfortable, because the comfort is based on inertia. Well, you now are very close to the sea. I'm coming from Barcelona, we are also to the sea. And I suppose that you begin to understand what it means to live close to such a big amount of inertia like is the sea. As we are so close to the sea, you know that winter weather here is warmer than if you are 100 kilometers inside Spain. The same is in Barcelona. This is not because you are so south, that of course it helps, but it's also because the big amount of inertia, that means the sea, keeps the excess of hot in summer and give it back to us in winter. That's the perform of inertia. When the amount of inertia is such big as the sea, it works from winter to summer. If the amount of inertia is lower, like in a house, it helps you from night to day and also from winter to summer. So the comfort conditions of this house is based on the structure. And this is pretty important to be understood, because this is something that is not in the picture, which is the feeling of the skin, which is about temperature, which is about humidity, which is about how the natural ventilation gives you conditions. Well, this one, it was the third step. Let's say that it's a little bit a Baroque step, where we get so involved in that idea of the behavior of the walls that we try to understand this as just one element, taking advantage of all the behaviors, not only the general idea that a wall is something that closes on a space, but also to be sensible to a lot other behaviors. This is a big house in the center of a small village close to the office, and is also based on walls. Is a house that is a large path crossing crossing walls and so on. And in terms of typology, it's interesting and so on. But I don't want to talk about the typology. I want to talk about that space. Okay? This is the entrance of the house. It's not a courtyard. It's not a patio. It's not a garden. But it's everything at the same time, because it works as a greenhouse in winter and it works as a patio in summer. Okay, but I want to show you this picture in terms that how, coming from that idea of work with walls, in this case we try to get deeper in that idea of the behavior of the wall. The first approach is about how it works in terms of a structure. So we began to place the lighter bricks on the top of the wall and to place the more dense bricks, the narrow bricks, on the bottom of the wall, because in terms of structural behavior, it's logic to understand that the heavy, it's higher in the base of the wall. So on the other instance, is a wall, so it's basically work as compression, but we need holes in that wall. So we try to develop a wall that is working at compression and at flexion at the same time, just with bricks. So this house has not beams to support the light of the house. It's the bricks with a very narrow reinforcement at every layer of the bricks that work as a brick beam. Okay, so that's why at certain levels of the wall there's narrow bricks, because it's the height of a hole in certain place of the house that is all the layer is reinforced to assume that it has to work as flexion. So it was a Baroque process. You understand Baroque in terms of get deeper and deeper and inside that idea of understand the behaviors and the subtle behaviors of the wall, that became also an expressive, a final expressive architecture based on walls. So it's not only about comfort, it's not only about geometry, it's also about narrative. It's also about the idea of architecture that we have. So I'm trying to make you understand that we are always in the same approach about relation between a space and a structure, but every step is about to find out as maximum number of roles as possible. Also in terms of architecture perception, in terms of composition, in terms of formal perception of the architecture. Also in terms of thermodynamics, that space is very important. The idea of the brick is again important because of the inertia, as I was talking before, the natural ventilation, the natural engine, and so on. But this house for us was that discovery that to get deeper involved with the idea of composition based also in the structure. So the formal drawing and the construction drawing is the same, because this drawing is explaining why every brick is in the place that is, but at the same time is our idea of facade, is our idea of formal perception of the space. Then it's a nice path, one space after another, crossing those halls and the garden, and it's a succession of boxes, sometimes open, sometimes closed, but brick boxes that defines a series of spaces. As Jacques Ondelat, it was a Jacques Ondelat picture before that I haven't said anything, but Ondelat said something that I really like, which is the idea that we have to do very specific spaces, but not specialized spaces. You know, the difference is for me is huge. What I mean, that when a space is too much defined by its function, is so much specialized, it's difficult to ask to this space to perform in different functions. So the real sentence from Ondelat was, functionalism is the enemy of freedom of use. So functionalism and freedom, which are both aims and items of the modern movement from the 20s, from the point of view of Ondelat, are opposites. So we prefer not high functional spaces, but high defined and special spaces. Very high, very narrow, with a lot of texture, with cross ventilation, with natural cross ventilation, with inertia. So very defined, with a lot of conditions that are giving to you a lot of conditions, but not a lot of functions. We try to place the function in a second level. Of course, that we have to live, we have to sleep, we have to cook, but the cooking is not what defines that space. The cooking is not what defines that space. What defines that space is very high. That the comfort in terms of temperature, it comes from the pavement. That there's a cross ventilation. That the light is like this and the hall is like this and so on. And of course, is a kitchen. Is again, I mean, I don't know if you know our staff, but at the beginning of the office, we used to be known because we used to be known as an office worried and concerned about medio ambiente, sustainability. After that, we became to be more or less well known because of the bricks. And today, I'm just talking about bricks. But what we are a specialist, in fact, is about the structures. Our high level of specialization is about the structures, because not because we are pretty good doing calculations, that we have certain notions and we are more or less able to do the structure project of our own small houses, but because we are able and we have confidence in ourselves to ask the structure to perform in a lot of roles. And I know that I'm repeating again the same concept, but for me it's the only important concept to explain. That it's the aim of the office every time, every project, trying to searching in the idea of the structure all what is possible to get from it. But at the end, so I'm showing it because this is a house for a famous guy, and again with a large budget, really rich guy, and we were lucky because by the time that we were developing the house, he was living in Dubai. So he has not a very clear idea. He had not a very clear idea about how the house is gonna be. So because of course from his point of view, that kind of facade is unacceptable. Because it's totally ugly. But I have to say that he's a very good friend of us from our childhood. But now he's completely happy in his house. He has come back to Barcelona. This is Granollers, and he's inviting everybody. I'm getting pictures of famous people having dinners every weekend here. Of course, he doesn't show that facade to his friends because this is the rear facade. You just get that facade when you come with your porch into because this house is with garage. We accept the garage here because we don't used to accept garage from our customers. In general, we don't accept certain commissions, specifically, of course, if they don't give us the level of freedom enough to develop the project and so on. But there's certain conditions that it doesn't matter how we'll end the project. But at the very beginning, if the customers through the commission are asking for a garage, we say that we don't want to do the project. It's like la prueba del algodón. At the end, maybe we're gonna do the garage. But no, in fact, we never do the garage because the garage is that. This is not a garage, let's say. This is a garden, this is a patio, this is a space with inertia that works as a greenhouse. Because if we are able to do something where you can place the car, but performs again as something that is not based on function, but in conditions, can assume the car into the house. But now, as we are getting more involved with that relation with the structure, what we try to develop a lot is levels of comfort, to find comfort conditions, asking for the natural perform of the structure, not to be against the structure in terms of comfort. You know what I mean? So, for example, the simplest, the easiest example, which I've been repeating a lot of times, the cross ventilation, natural cross ventilation. If you face your project south-north and the halls are certain proportion and are really opposite, you know that because of the difference of temperature, south facade, north facade, you can get at certain moments of the day, not all the time, you will get natural cross ventilation. When you work with inertia, this is totally neat because as we don't have the amount of inertia that has the sea, you can use that inertia on summertime, you can use that inertia during the day. No? The inertia is helping you because it's getting the excess of hot during the day, but you need to ventilate a lot because that excess of hot has to be dissipated. So the Mediterranean climate, it's perfect on that strategy because, well, now it's changing because Spain is getting more a desert, but till now, the Mediterranean weather is perfect because it's not too extreme. It's changing all the time, which is not easy for the architects in front of different kind of climates that are always cold or always hot. The Mediterranean climate is always changing, but at the same time has a changing up between day and night at summer. So if you can be around 20 degrees at night, 19, then that inertia model can work. You can dissipate at night the excess of hot that the structure has keep during the day, okay? Well, this that I'm trying to describe, I don't know if good enough, but I hope that it could be understood. What I'm describing is something that is in the nature of the materials organized in a certain geometry. It's not my desire. If I reorganize, if I define certain geometries with certain materials, its natural perform is like this, to help giving comfort conditions. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the nature of the building. So we try now in our projects to develop, to take advantage of the nature of the building, how the building wants to perform in terms of comfort. This is also again, a very simple house with, this is a low budget house, but I just show you this as it could look as a very simple example of what I've been talking about. A lot of inertia because all the walls are structural, so all the walls are high density walls with bricks, so give you that sense of being in a cave. Have you been in Granada? I hope you will visit Granada because you have been your Spanish experience here. So Granada is a perfect place to go. I recommend you. In Granada, there's people, not only in Granada, but Granada is a nice place to go and to visit people who live in caves. And doesn't live in caves because they are absolutely poor. There's some cases, but there's beautiful houses into caves. I've been sleeping in a house of a friend of me who is architect teaching in Granada school, who lives in a cave. In terms of comfort, the performance of a cave, his natural performing is extraordinary because it's like the sea. It has such an amount of inertia over your head that it's always 17 degrees, always 17 degrees. So he needs a small heater in winter, and in summer he's perfect. Okay? At the bottom of the cave. So the nature of his house, in its nature, the comfort is included. Okay, so in this kind of houses with the structural walls, you have a little bit of that cave perform included. But as been talking before, as the amount of inertia is lower, you need to combine the inertia with the cross ventilation because you have to take off the excess of heat. Okay, so this is a very geometric, very easy to understand how the cross ventilation works and that idea of space defined by structure and so on. But this case is interesting for a different thing. The budget was so low that we don't get a budget enough for the foundations, or at least to do deep foundations. And the soil of the plot was really bad. So it was needed to place a very strong and deep foundations, because the first layer of the soil was absolutely not enough, is supposed, in terms of support. So what we did is to do, of course, just one floor house, to put all the heavy at large of all the walls. All the walls are working in terms of a structure to dissipate the heavy in the soil. And just in a very narrow merge, we were able to place the foundations in the natural slope of the. But of course, that a house has to be flat. So the difference, the geometrical difference between the pavement and the natural slope of the floor was filled with small stones, grava. Okay. So we just fill it with more inertia. We're always talking about the same, I'm sorry. So the funny in the house is that we are not working only with the inertia of the walls, we're working also with the inertia of that small stones, clean small stones, into the pavement, and we give the level of climate that we don't get by natural reasons, we get with fresh or cold air that we make cross that big amount of inertia. So the air is a little bit pre-treated, but just a little bit, just a couple of degrees. So we get air from outside, we give it just a couple or 3 degrees up in winter or less in summer, and we make all the air cross that huge amount of inertia before the air come into the space. And then it gets up by a mechanical fan on the top. So we help a little bit the natural behavior of the house, but using the specific conditions of the house. So it's at the end, our houses looks more like I hope it looks more like a porch than like a house. But I have to say that 70% of the hours in Spain, you will live happier in a porch than in a house. I don't know if you agree, because some of you are from abroad. So, but I have that clear idea that it's fantastic to live in a porch in Spain. In a porch far better than under a tree. I mean, because of the inertia. So this is also an interesting, because as you see, and I have also that clear idea that to project is also to do research. Without research, and I'm talking also to you about as a students that you are, without a personal research, without a personal aim of research, it's impossible to do real projects. If you don't have that personal concern about the projects, then you're going to your teachers asking for permission. I'm doing it well enough to get to pass, but if you have your personal aim in terms of research, you're developing your project and you will show the projects to your teacher, not asking for permission, but sharing how happy you are because you've discovered something. So for me, to research and to project is basically synonymous. And I advise you to do the same as a student, because from the point of view of teachers, it's clear when someone is asking for permission or is sharing beautiful ideas. In this case, the research, and is a research that is nowadays in the table of the office, is trying to get all what I've been explaining to you also in a monoblock solution, in a one-layer solution. As you've seen in the first couple or 3 houses, we were working in that very traditional system of structural walls, but with different layers of structural walls, placing insulation in the middle, okay? This is a first example that we've developed of a house that there's no insulation in the middle. It's a house made with what I call super product, okay? This is the super brick. This is the incredible super brick. Of course, it's not a Spanish brick, I'm sorry. But in Spain, we have something now that is very close to that, because this house is from, like, let's say 5 years ago. But now, well, I don't know, it sounds to you the concept termoarcilla, thermal brick. Thermal brick is a brick and cooked and cocido, well, and cooked at certain temperature that is less dense than a common brick. So with these conditions, because of the geometry, amount of air, and the density, it has a conductivity enough to perform not bad, it's not perfect. It's not as good as an insulation layer. But for our research, it was a really nice research to try to give comfort conditions with a wall. In terms of insulation, it's not as good as a multi-layer wall, but in terms of transpiration, it's perfect because it's a natural one element between you and outside. So in terms of transpiration, is absolutely healthy, comfortable, and you have that feeling to be in a porch again. Okay, so this is called proton, and it's like that kind of thermal brick that works amazing in terms of conductivity. This was the research. The house also itself is a research. It's a house. It's like a cluster. It's two clusters, with no artificial systems, that works in terms of comfort just by natural sun gains. Okay, it's these two spaces, non-programmed spaces, that work as a distribution, as a courtyard, as an inside courtyard, as a seating. It has no name, but it has a lot of nice conditions for living inside. And the specific program surrounds that two special spaces, giving specific programs to the family. The only previous interest of the plot, it was a very beautiful tree that is explanation of the gesture, of the movement of that box to open a door to the tree, and the other movement is to open a door to the entrance. Okay. Well, one courtyard is oriented to the south, the other is to the east. Okay. Here in Spain, we never give face, if we can avoid, to the west. West here, I say because I've been in Sweden, and the west is far more valued in Sweden than here in the south, because the sun is good enough to admit. But here, the west in summer is terrible, because you have not only the hot, but the hot of the air after all the day. Not only the hot of the sun, but also the hot of the air. So the west orientation is terrible. This is a beautiful drawing again, but it's the same. The drawing of the architecture, the main drawing is at the same time the basic construction process drawing, because it's talking about the element that give conditions to the space, which is that brick that, as you see, we are very severe and very serious, very rigorous in the idea of drawing brick by brick, if we have to understand how it performs. The tree, so on. No, it's not that. Okay, and that's my last project that I will explain. This is a facility in Barcelona. Cristalleries Planell. This used to be a factory, a glass craft work factory at the beginning of the 20th century. The factory began this is in the Las Corts neighborhood. This is not far away from Football Club Barcelona Stadium. So it's not in the center of the city, but it's in the center of one of the neighborhoods of the city. Okay. Barcelona, as you know, used to be a group of small villages surrounding what used to be a city into the walls, into the original walls. Till the end of the 19th century, Barcelona was just a city into the walls. So then it grows up through the Champlain and so on, and then all that small villages get included into the big city. Las Corts was one of these original villages, now a neighborhood. And we get that commission through a competition. The number we give, as you see, we give to our project a number. In general, we explain our projects just showing a number. The number is the year of the commission, and the second part is the number of the commission of that year. So Cristalleries Planell, which was open on 2018, we won the competition in 2010. So you have to understand that, I don't know if you get that, but I suppose that you begin to smell that the architecture process is a very slow process. So we won it in 2010, and we opened just 2 years ago. It was an open competition, and it has just two very specific conditions. That the plot was a terrible geometry plot. People think that we are specialized in triangular plots, but it's not. And the second condition is that 2 of the 3 facades of the plot were protected by law because it's the original facade or the most interesting part of the original facade of that huge factory. The factory was absolutely huge. The plot of the competition was only that corner I'm showing here, okay? So that corner here, which is that facades that you see here, which used to be the office of the owner, Mr. Planell, and the showroom where the families, rich families of Barcelona came here to buy the vajilla, the glasses and cups for the sons when get married. Okay, so this was like this, that huge factory. There was a showroom, there was a lot of stuff, and this is the most representative facade of the factory, so that's why it's protected. And the other condition, which is the shape, is explained because the huge factory was like this, was all that part. But during the years, the city grows up, and after the 50s, when the factory just closed, the city has grown like this, letting to the citizens the worst plot possible. How works the growth of the cities? If you're getting someone, a private someone, to get a gain in terms of economics, part of the gains has to come back to the citizens in form of facilities placed in public plots. So that part, that narrow triangular plot, is the part of the public profit of a huge operation of housing, of very expensive, rich, and luxury housing that it's having, that has take place here. I don't know if you know La Llave de Oro, but it's the name of the people that make not very high quality apartments, but at high price. So it doesn't matter. The facility goes in that terrible geometrical plot with that protected facade. I want to explain this project. It's the same like the projects before, but this is very specific, how the structure gives conditions to the air. There's something that we have discovered, that the air, this is something that we don't see, and we don't pay much attention to the air. But it's through the air that we get temperature, that we get the sense of humidity. Also vision is through the air. So the air is the interface between the feeling, the personal perception, and the conditions that we give through our architecture. So pay attention to the air, it began to seem pretty important. Okay, so this is a project that you will see that the shape is very orthogonal, like very serious, but this also, all the decisions are based on how to pay attention to the air. But in terms of architecture and in terms of strategies, it's very simple. As we have two facades concerned about these original facades with industrial proportions, and we have to place here a new building, a new facility for adult school. This is an adult school, adult people who want to learn Catalan, and also a facility for neighborhood community groups and so on. So there was a lot of program to place here, so no high floors and so on. So we decided the first strategy was to place the building 2 steps behind the original walls, producing a courtyard between the original wall, the original facade, and the new facade. Okay, so thanks to this courtyard, we get something that was really important: more natural light. As is an adult school, so there's classrooms, and the original facade was with that very not proportioned halls and different highness and so on. We decided that thanks to that 2 steps decision, producing that courtyard, we not only make more homogeneous the natural light, but we also get the ceiling natural light, okay, because of the courtyard. After that, we discovered that it would be a good decision to make perform it not only as a courtyard, but as an atrium. So we decided to cover that courtyard with an EFTE layer, a plastic layer, a captation layer, that makes that this courtyard works as a greenhouse in winter and works as a garden in summer, okay? Closing and opening to get more or less ventilation. So in winter is a greenhouse, like in the third step. In summer is like there's a lot of air crossing the building. Why I'm talking that all the decisions have to give conditions to the air? Because in this building, this is a facility. In a facility, it's not enough to come into an agreement with the customer. You have to be very serious with low minimums in terms of salute, in terms of healthy, in terms of structural, and so on. But we wanted to make it work as natural as possible. So all this building is based in this in its natural performance. What is its natural performance? That is a classroom. It's basically adult people, 25 adult people into a small classroom, because the plot is very narrow. What does it mean? That in winter time, is not need of any heating system, okay? It's in the nature of the building to be in good conditions in winter time, okay? This could be perfect. I suppose that you know or have some notions about the passive house. Okay, so this is basically a passive house idea. So let's keep all the warm inside in winter, because we have 25 people working as heatings, walking around. And let's open as maximum in summer, where the inertia of the structure will help me to temperate the inside space. This is perfect, but in winter, if you don't want to die with the rest of the 24, you need to renovate the air, okay? And in summer, if you want to dissipate the excess of hot in the inertia, you need an incredible engine to move all the air necessary, okay? So we were on that place, the idea of passive, and it was only necessary to put a fan, a big fan, to move the air a little bit in winter and a lot in summer. It was at that point that we decided that we wanted to be not only natural in the strategy, but also natural in the engine. The engine that has to move all that big amount of air, especially in summer, we wanted to develop a natural engine, okay? So that's why this building has this strange roof. This roof is a natural engine. This is a sun chimney. Well, in fact, 4 sun chimneys able to move 15,000 meters of air per hour on summertime. And this is not based on my desire. This is based in something called thermodynamics. And the good part of thermodynamics is that never get broken. Something that you cannot say about a fan, about a mechanical fan, okay? Of course that there's some fans in that building because we have to accomplish with certain laws, and in certain specific moments, maybe the sun chimney is not working all right. But the fan that we've developed is just in case of emergency, and is like this in front of the fan that should be there to move all that huge amount of air. Okay, so we get the inertia, we get the natural engine. Then there's no pipes. Why there's no pipes? Because when you design the movement of the air based on an architecture based on inertia, you don't have to use pipes, because you need that the air cures all the surfaces of the walls. You're not moving air from one place to another through a pipe. You have to move air from the patio to the classroom, from the classroom to another place, and so on. But you need that the air take off the excess of hot. So you will see that in our architectures, in general, there's no pipes. And it doesn't mean that there's no one strategy in terms of comfort and renovation and so on. But we really need to discharge, to dissipate the inertia. So from the patio, the air coming to the classrooms with that windows that opens and close and so on. Well, the structure here, but the point, so the structure gives shape to the program. The good part of the triangle is that because of the geometry of the triangle, the proportion between classrooms and administration service are very well, gets a good proportion, just giving the same structural distance between walls. On the north side, there's the administrative program. In the south side, there's the classrooms programs. In this direction, there's no, as I called at the very beginning, a structural wall is a structural system. It's not only necessary a wall in one direction, you need also walls in the other direction to make the system stable, okay? In this case, you will see that there's no crossing walls because we want a flexible situation where the classrooms could change in the future, okay? So there's no crossing walls to make the structure stable. The structure became stable because there's these little horns that work as a stabilization of the wall, okay? Also made with bricks, and has two roles. At the same time that give stabilization to the main wall, it just at the same time gives shape to this air that is pulled up by the sun chimney. So the air comes from the patio to the classroom, and through these horns, these structural horns, is the place that every classroom is related with the sun chimney to put the air up. So it's a very complex solution, but based in just a couple of decisions. This is the entrance, because the south courtyard is completely different, but the north and the south courtyard works the same way. It's the pre-treatment of the air. So previously that the air coming to the classroom, it gets warmer in winter in the greenhouse, or it gets fresh thanks to the inertia and the vegetation in the courtyards. Then you cross the wall. This every white wall is a structural wall with that corridor that gives service to all the classrooms. And here you have that nice experience that thanks to that just 2 meters courtyard, you have that double perception of the two facades in front one of each other, and that idea of contrast between the atmosphere of what is happening in one side and what is happening inside. The administrative part is working in front of the other courtyard, the north one. There's also something that I haven't talked before, that we have discovered that that idea of uncoated materials give also a tip to the architectural experience, which is something a little bit naive, but at the same time I think is beautiful. People, we love tales. In fact, today I'm explaining you a tale, which is the Age Architect's tale. But in general, we love tales, we love narratives, and so on. And we have the feeling that the uncoated solutions explain something, at least are explaining the construction process. I'm sure that everybody agrees here that is a nice feeling to come into a house, an old house that has something to explain you, that it's explaining its own history, or into a vintage building, into a castle, into an old farmhouse. You always have that feeling of tale, that the house is explaining you its own history. I think that is a nice feeling that, in general, if you're not a psychopath, we can share more or less. We have that very small idea, not as important maybe as the other, that because we our decision to uncoat the materials is because of the inertia and the humidity control and so on and so on. But you have that tip at the end of the process that is at the same time explaining you, at least, if not an historical tale, is explaining you the construction process tale. It's explaining you something that has happened before you come into the building. And this is something that in general is always comfortable. So, because of course that this building is also about memory. It's also about how you deal with the old parts and how you decide that in a very it's completely copied from Colonia Museum of Zumthor. That decision that we place the new wall at the same level. The new wall, the new facade, is over the old facade. In fact, we are really respectful with the old material, because the first thing that we did here is ask to the old walls its own attributes. We asked the walls if they were still able to support something over them. So because we get a lot of discussions with the city council about how has to be the final coating of the old facade. We're asking them that we didn't want to coat with any kind of plaster. It doesn't matter if it was really the original plaster and so on. We wanted to show all the layers, all the chronology of the old facades, showing its own history, and assuming that we are a new layer of history, but being absolutely respectful with the wall by asking the wall to work in a structural way, asking the wall to work in a thermodynamical way, because the inertia of the wall is helping the south courtyard to keep in good conditions in summertime. So I think that this is the proper position in terms of heritage. That is not only to put a frame, but to put in use. So the old wall, which was a ruin, which was just pure compositional heritage, now is giving conditions to the courtyards, is supporting part of the facade, and is working as it was designed originally, as a facade, as a wall, as a structure, and so on. In the south facade, this is a real structural wall, but that is working as a greenhouse, because the courtyard in winter works as a greenhouse. In summer, all the halls get open, the top of the roof gets open, and then becomes again a courtyard. It's some people think that this is like, because it's very similar to the first house that I've shown, and it's like a trademark of Harquitectes. It's just because of the conditions of the plot. You've seen that it's not about us. This is a nice brick that we discovered during the process, which is a mass glass brick that we used to give more light into the courtyards. And just to end, this is about to repeat again that idea of behavior, the general performance of the building, talking a little bit more about the most interesting part of the building, which is the sun chimney. A sun chimney, it has a very nice effect. A sun chimney is a pure greenhouse effect. Okay, is a greenhouse with a transparent layer and a black layer. It's a greenhouse without any kind of inertia. It's completely the opposite, because you need the sun chimney effect at the moment. Okay. So when there's a lot of sun, the black layer became into 70, 90 degrees. So that produced a huge amount of depression, because the air in between the two layers get really hot. So as you know, because of the hot air goes up very fast, and that depression has to be substituted by the same amount of air. And this air comes from the classrooms. Okay, so This is the basic idea. But what is funny about that? That in a passive house concept, in winter time, I want to move as few as possible of air because I want to keep the warm inside the classrooms, okay? And the sun chimney in Barcelona, in winter, it doesn't work very well because the sun, it goes lower, okay? There's less hours of sun, the sun is less potent, okay? And in winter is the opposite, in summer, sorry, is the opposite. In summer, the slope of the sun chimney is the perfect orientation for the height of the sun. There's more hours of sun, and is in summer. So a greenhouse that is a bad idea in Barcelona suddenly becomes the perfect invention to move air because it moves a lot of air. In summer is when I want to dissipate the excess of hot inside the classroom, and is an awful invention in winter. But it's in winter that I want to move as minimum as possible of it. To do that, it's not possible with the help of engineers. I don't want to look as if I'm the one who developed this. We developed the concept. The concept came from the architecture. The idea to find out in natural process, natural engines, to work with inertia and so on. This is but to develop, to be serious on that, what is not possible anymore is to talk about sustainability in terms of common sense. I used to have teachers that told me about, well, this stuff of, to talk about sustainability is about to talk about common sense, heritage, big walls, and so on. And of course it's about that, because our grandparents used to have very wisdom decisions about their homes and so on and so on. It's true. But to do that kind of stuff, it's not only possible with common sense. You need the help of engineers, but special engineers. Engineers who want to solve the comfort, not with artificial engines, but with natural behaviors process. Not all the engineers are able to do that or want to do that. But we are lucky because we found during our 20 years, a lot of people that want to perform as engineers, but to produce comfort through natural conditions, not through artificial conditions. And with that last nice sentence, I will end because I'm really tired. Easy questions.
First is about reasons for designing the different patterns in the walls, the different rhythms of vibrations. So I understand that there is a lot of decisions which can directly from the building requirements, but I ask if there is any moment where this change, this design starts explaining your own aims and not only translating building requirements. And the second question is about the facilities space. I mean, about the structural space. Which is really a nice device for reaching this kind of so clean and strong plans. But this strategy, I think that comes from the past, from a moment where we haven't facilities in our houses. And so my question is how you face this problem, the problem of the bathroom, the problem of the little space in this structural space you are designing. It's normally a problem with space.
About the first, well, there's a book that I always ask my students to read. I haven't read it like 20 years ago, so it is that Eupalinos and the Architect, the Paul Valéry. Paul Valéry talks about the idea of that there's an ethic of the design. There's a process that we as a designers, we have to have an ethical position. An ethical position means that in front of every decision of the process, you have to say, this is bad, this is good. So, of course, that when we are designing, we are not only taking objective, perfect objective and scientific decisions, as I could answer you again that the rhythms are absolutely based on the position of the bricks and its behavior in terms of structure and so on and so on. But of course, it's not only. And now I begin to feel confident enough about what we do to answer that there's also a perceptive idea about what we want to produce in terms of perception of the space. So, of course, that at the end is a compositional decision to put that hole here, not here, to use that rhythm, etc. But it's not about that, it's more about textures, of course, to produce certain textures that we have the certain that it will emphasize, will produce a more strong experience in that space. That's why at the very beginning, the triangular house is a pure result of an economic reason. But the third house that I've shown is not only about that. It's of course also about the idea of what will happen if we have a specific experience, not only visual, but also tactile, into a non-programmed space. In fact, it happened after a very, the house with the large high courtyard that I've shown with all that bricks. It was after to visit a very bizarre, strange, I don't know if you know, but in Catalonia we have a bizarre tradition. We, on the public holidays, we take off on the streets giants. Have you seen it? Big toys, huge toys. We call it giants. It's made of cardboard and so on. And we hold it into very strange buildings because it has to be very high and not big. So after visit one of these spaces that was like a very conventional house in Terrassa with a very small door, we opened that door because we got a meeting there. We opened the door and you come into, it's like aquí tenéis las fallas. We have to do the fallas into a specific building. So imagine that you are in a very conventional street, you open that small door and suddenly you are into a space in that proportion. After that experience, or after the experience of the query, of course that affects our idea of perception, and we cross that with that objective or let's say scientific approach based on the behavior of the staff. But I have to say also that it's very difficult to explain the projects about a specific perception, specific and personal perceptions. I know that it exists, and of course that when we are the four together taking decisions, that specific moment that you introduce the idea of atmosphere, of perception, is always there, but for me it's quite impossible to transmit. So why that's, sometimes it looks like I'm explaining the projects as if it's a logical process and undoubtedly without any other possibility. It's not like that, of course. About the second, you asked about the... Sí. Well, Jacques Delat, very interesting French architect, wrote in the 80s an article. He used to have a group called the Blue, I don't know what. And they did like a manifesto. And he explained how, and it's a very funny manifesto, it doesn't look as if he's talking about architecture. And he begins like, I remember that summer in that house, an old house, he explained you summer in an old house. And the end was, I never get better dining than in the stairs of that house. I never get a better nap than in the terrace of that. I mean that the idea is that bathrooms, as bathrooms, has to be there. But if it's possible, has to be as a nice experience as the rest of the spaces. And if this is not possible, then we assume, as on the lab said, that kind of houses with special spaces, but not specific spaces, have to assume that there's some places for techniques. So if it's possible, what we tried in general, all those houses, I haven't come into the bathrooms a lot, but the bathrooms are luxury in general, because are as big, because for us, in terms of the matrix of spaces, is one space more. And if we can produce a different experience to the customer, for us it's a change, it's an opportunity. So if the house is big enough and the conditions are good enough, we always try to, but doing something that Le Corbusier told us, which is to make the difference between water and WC. Because water is a luxury. This is a very French concept that for me is still nowadays formidable. That you have to place away the bathroom, the WC, which is something ugly, nasty, dirty. But to put your body in relation with water, that's the big luxury that you can have at your home. So what we try is to place in a very specific technique position the WC, and we try to give conditions for the experience with water as luxury as possible.
So you when make homes, you make them uncovered from the exterior. But in the interior, you always painting or covered with something. And I don't know if it's
no. In general, no, we don't. But sometimes are painted, and it's true that paint is a material, is a certain level of coating. But well, because the good thing is not about bricks; it's about porosity. It's about porosity. Any material, any product with porous, any natural product like stone, timber, even concrete or bricks, has this natural perform that keeps humidity inside when there's too much humidity and give it back to you when it's a lack of humidity. So we uncoat the materials at the very beginning for economic reasons. We uncoat the materials after that because it looks nice. We uncoat the material because it explains the structural behavior. But we also uncoat the materials because in terms of humidity, in terms of transpirability, not only getting back the humidity into the space, but also making a healthy enclosure, assuming a natural, like the skin, that is able to control the level of, in a natural way, the skin control our level of interchange with the environment. So in the same way, that use of uncoated materials, not only outside, but also inside. So that's, when you see white walls, it's not plaster, it's just paint, but it has to be very specific paint. It has to be silicates paint or paint based on clay, not clay, calcs. It doesn't matter. It has to be a transpirable paint. Okay? But in general, but I have to say that this is a very personal position. I mean, it's totally not. I mean, I'm not trying to explain that this is the only way. The only way to produce architecture is with an uncoated interiors. Of course not. In fact, for us, painting every time is becoming a real coating. So that's why, if you have paid attention, you've seen that we don't turn the corners with the paintings, because we assume that the painting is like a layer more. So if you turn the paint into the white of the wall, it suddenly becomes just a coating. But if you keep the paint just in the flat of that face, suddenly it's just a material with a very, very narrow white. Okay. But please coat everything. No, I'm not talking because of the question. I'm saying that in terms that I don't want to look like someone giving a dogma about that it's not good to plaster. Plaster is cool. Now I'm doing a house for our economic advisor, let's say, the office, gestor, and we are placing them a lot of plasterboard walls. Full, o sea, que se joda un poco. No, because he's a very nice guy, he's a very good friend of us, but he's always with that idea that he's very practical, and we are not, that he's very functionalist, and we are not, that he's earning money, and we are not. And so he has asked for a house. We cannot say no to him, because he's our friend, he's our... with porch, with house, with porch for a car. Now it's for 2 cars, but a Tesla. Fuck you. 2 cars, but one is a Tesla. So we are in order in terms of sustainability, don't worry. But he's so conventional in his own definition that he wants a conventional house. We are doing a pretty special house. I love it. But we are placing some plasterboard walls because in certain, I haven't come into all the details. There's a lot of stuff to explain, and there's a lot of coatings, and so be free to take your decision. Some more questions?
Thank you very much for your speech. You have talked about so many things that I really trust in. For instance, your work is about providing performing spaces rather than final objects. Of course, our task is design with matter. The final aim, the final challenge is providing this freedom for people. To talk about inertia, talk about the usage of the space. Give me some references to Can, where there is a conscious reference to Can and the follow column or the room, recovering the room. And you talk about this internal dialogue between column and words. Sumerian architecture, and depending on the age, it has some stirring the wall or the column or a plain solution. The thing is, of course, this kind of architecture in which the structural wall has a huge presence and help us to define a specific space. And we can control these conditions, we can differentiate very clearly the outside and the inside. Then the inertia is not about just temperature or weather, but about the experience of transition along the architecture. But then there is some limits that with a net of structure or concrete or steel structure you can overtake. Then this is perfectly working for small houses. But there have to test it with a bigger scale building.
Well, in fact, I would like to make understand that the wall was our tool to come into that idea that what is important is to give that the structure is able to give conditions, and is the, for us, is the comfortable way to give conditions to the space. But during those years, we have discovered that there's a lot of structures, and there's a different way to give conditions to the space. And in fact, as I'm shown only bricks projects, is basically based on walls. But now, for instance, we are beginning a house in the center of Barcelona. It's a house, it's not a very wide plot, but it's based on columns, brick columns, because for me, a column made of bricks is a fantastic element to produce an experience in terms of a space because of the geometry. and also can assume a lot of inertia. It's true that because of our past in the office, we doesn't call that columns. We call a very light wall. It's true, it's like this. With Roger and so on, we talk like, it's a group of columns because it's 7 meters house from wall to wall. And it's like 3 columns, 4 spaces, 3 columns. So it's like, and it's an hypostyle space. Every floor is the common floor for the family, is the floor of the kids, is the floor of the parents, and every floor is like free space from one facade to the other, crossed by 2 lines of columns. And for us, is a clear example about how the structure gives conditions to the space in terms of, and it's based on bricks, because the nice part is that if I did this with concrete, it has no sense to put any column between 7 meters. But if you place it with bricks, it has a lot of sense to place a lot of columns because the possibility to support the structure is far less. So for me, we have discovered that the wall is not the only way, but we have discovered that the structure is the way. Then, but with brick, we're still working with walls in general. About the other is true, is obvious, but except maybe Can, who can explain a big scale project with the same level of personal research, with the same level of to feel concerned about its own architecture when he changed from the small scale to the big scale? I think I'm sorry to think that I don't know if there's any rule to come into the big facility and do it all right, or to do it excellent. But Zumthor is not big buildings. The biggest building of Zumthor is not built. Can maybe, I don't know. But yesterday we began a 16,000 square meters building, but it's house. But it's structural walls, made with bricks and so on. I think that in a big facility, is obviously it's not easy to export all these kind of approaches. I'm trying to think while I'm talking about competitions or stuff that we've done, and it's true that it's true, and this is a lack of the office. We have a lack of confidence in the outside. It's true. We are really, I don't know why, because maybe we are for the way that we discuss the projects, but in general, the biggest building that we've done is a research center, absolutely defined, but it's in concrete, so I cannot explain it today. But it's a structure that really gives conditions to the space, but only in horizontal orientation. The skin of the building is a greenhouse skin and so on. So, but also that building has no window, or has just a couple of windows, because we always prefer to have the relations with the outside through natural tools like colors, adjuncts, and so on. So, in fact, as we are not really interested in the views or the idea of sightseeing, maybe. Well, it's a problem for the office. I really don't know how we're gonna develop it, but not with bricks, possibly.
About so I have a question. What's like a valid the brick that does not have material?
No. There's no. The difference is that brick, in terms of culture and economics, is the most available product in our cultural system. So, but in fact, we have just finished a house made with cyclopic concrete, with the stones of the plot. We have taken the stones of the plot. We have put it into cement, dry cement, and we have made huge walls of concrete because the available element there was the stone.
Well, I have to say that it's true that the brick, it transmits you the sense of a craft work. At least the bricks that we choose. There's a lot of bricks. There's a lot of bricks. For me, the face of the brick, for me, is not interesting. In two ways. That if it looks craft work, it's an artificial look. As it's designed to be placed in the outside face, facade, is protected, the porous is closed by the process. And for me, it's artificial. I love that kind of bricks that are produced to be coated, because of that kind of bricks that has different colors, different densities. You have the feeling of the heat, the oven. You can see how the oven has changed the color. So that gives you that sense of pain that I was talking about. So that you were talking about, yeah, it gives you, I don't know if it's a comfort idea, but it's about history, tales. It gives you the idea. Do you like to come into a new car when it smells like car? Yeah? A new car, well, or maybe I like it because a car is the idea of the perfect machine. So a car is only interesting when it's absolutely new, when it's perfect. But how do it's not a car? I hate to come into a building, it doesn't matter, that smells like me. And I don't know who smells our buildings, but it doesn't look like me. You never have the feeling to be in an open room. You have always the feeling that that building has a previous history. Something has happened before the construction. And in this sense, the brick is really powerful. But you have to do it. We've been researching bricks for years. Maybe we are the ones who know more treatment of bricks. We ask every building, we ask for lots of bricks to see columns and so on. Now we have a favorite from us because it's very cheap and it's made. But we try to work with that kind of conventional structural bricks that are produced to be coated, not that typical bricks to be placed on facade. Like you can get that sense with other materials. I mean, we've done a lot of stuff with timber. Timber has also that clear sense of craft work. It performs in terms of natural comfort perfectly well. It has no inertia, but you have to assume it's a different idea of natural comfort. It's really amazing. Well, thank you very much.
Bueno.